My name is Robert Kissinger. Hello, everybody. I grew up here in Essex, spent my childhood, so I'm very familiar with both the village and the town setup. And I've been luckily employed with Essex for 21 years. And my reason for coming to Essex is the reason why I grew up in Essex. It's a great community, very supportive of the community. The community is very supportive of the police, so it's a good fit, and I've loved every minute of my time here at Essex.
Cool. And then we have Chris Ashley with us today. So she looks like she's a million miles away there on that camera, but she's actually so can you hear us okay, Chris?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. So we're not hearing you that well, so you might want to move a little closer to that camera.
Okay.
So Chris is actually, today is her last day after 30, how many years, Chris?
35 years and 2 months.
35 years and 2 months. So she actually retired 2 years ago in 2019 and came back as our animal control officer and has done a fantastic job in that for the last almost 2 years. And today, well, last week or week before, she informed me that she was going to finally retire altogether. So she's leaving as of today as her last day. So that's why I wanted her to come on. And I'm going to ask her to kind of go over what she thinks is important in her career and talk about her career a little bit. And then be available to answer any questions about animal control or anything like that that you all might have. Chris?
Okay. It's just basically been an honor and a pleasure to have worked at Essex Police Department. I started as a Burlington police officer. And Burlington back then was a very difficult place to work. They lost a lot of people, and I was this close to just being out of law enforcement entirely. But Essex had an opening which was so rare. That was the thing. Essex was the place to work. It had even 37 years ago, it was the favorite place, and they didn't usually have openings. And I was so fortunate to be able to be hired by Essex Police Department. And here, 35 years later, a person who was almost going to be out of law enforcement entirely because of the previous bad experience, so it's been amazing. The community is wonderful. I feel very proud of the people that I've helped and the people who have helped me along the way. I've had some amazing relationships with citizens through the years and decades, and it's been just amazing. So, it's bittersweet, but I'm leaving the place in good hands.
Appreciate that. We appreciate your service too. Does anybody have any questions or anything like that they want to start out with, or have anything they want to talk about in particular? I see Brad with his hand up. So,
just a question: do you have someone slated for Chris's position? We certainly have. It seems like we certainly have a need in this town, given all the Facebook and front page forum comments about animals and the problems they're having in Indian Brook and so forth.
I would certainly agree with that, Chris. I think you would agree. You've been pretty busy the last year and a half, 2 years dealing with animals, and yeah, we can't go without one. So right now we're considering how we're going to fill that. We have contracted in the past with an outside person, and then when Chris retired, it was really convenient for her to come back as a part-time officer as well as the animal control officer. So unfortunately, we don't have anybody lined up like that right now. But that was a really good way to do it. But so we're not sure how we're going to do that yet. So trying to think if anybody has any ideas or anybody that might be interested in contracting with us to do animal control, we'd certainly be interested in entertaining it. So
what would be the criteria?
Chris? want to talk about what you've been doing?
Well, it depends. Are we talking about a civil position or a part-time law enforcement?
No, just to do animal control, not law enforcement.
Yeah.
Well, to be really on top of your game, you need to take specialized classes from the police academy, which is up to about 4 days of training so you can understand and investigate animal neglect cases that from domestic animals to farm animals. So that has to be, I think, the criteria that to be an effective enforcement officer, ACO. And they have to be good, able to talk to people, deal with animals of, in a variety of ways and conditions. Be reasonable, people, a lot of people you just have to explain things to so they understand what's going on and have a fix things. But I think they need to be, if it's going to be a part-time officer, that would be great because of enforcement that sometimes just having the uniform makes it a little bit easier to carry out. But civilians can do that too, but it's quite a jump from being hired and then enforcing things as a civilian. And talking to people and having them be able to do what you need to do. You need to have them do.
It's really difficult to hear you, Chris. I'm sorry.
I think Ron just walked from his office down to the conference room to help.
Oh, I'm getting every trouble on my last day. Oh my gosh.
It sounds kind of like you're talking in a jar or something. It's really muffled.
How is that?
Is that any better?
A little bit.
It's a little bit, but it really does sound like you're in a, as Jill says, a jar.
It is a big room that she's in, so.
The camera is right in front of me, and I'm in front of the computer.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. She's in the same building, so I'm going to go pull her into my office here. So hang on 1 second, guys.
And Carmel, I see that you have your hand raised for when we're done talking about the animal control position.
Yeah, actually, it was an animal control question, so I'll wait till she can hear.
Hey, Rob, what functions do you carry out at the PD?
Day-to-day operations of the police department, oversee scheduling. Right now I'm working on policies, updating policies, a little bit of everything. But mainly right now I've been working on pretty much policies for the last 4 months.
Sure.
Going through and updating the policies. We just got body worn cameras, so we had to adjust our policy to count for the body worn cameras.
Those are being used now?
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic.
And
So as
that is
of
gonna
the 15th, we started using them.
Great.
And Ron intended for body cams to be part of the conversation today, but I see Chris is now possibly back online.
You want to go ahead?
I'm here. Can you?
Is that any better, guys?
Yes.
Yes, it
Okay,
is.
I'm going to let her talk then,
Yes.
and then let her finish what she was saying.
So basically, qualifications for a good, effective animal control officer is at least 4 days of training at the police academy for animal cruelty investigations. Because otherwise you're really not going to be effective. And if you are looking into something, you can't help get that case prosecuted ultimately. So there has to be some training. Civilians can go through that. Law enforcement officers as well need to go through that to be able to investigate and have their investigations prosecuted by the state's attorney's office. Certainly you have to like animals and be good with animals and people to be able to be effective in your position as animal control officer. It's always very difficult to talk to people about issues with the way they handle their animals or what their animals are doing, as well as their children. But so you have to be a good communicator and be able to convince people, chat with people, get them to do what needs to be done so they are complying with ordinances and laws and common sense.
So previous law enforcement experience is not required, but training at the police academy would be.
Yeah, most likely, but we would probably set that up, or most likely would set that up for whoever we were to hire. But it would have to be someone, if we're going to go outside, really the folks that we have contracted in the past have had kind of their own insurance. They would kind of like an outside contractor would have, and then they contract with the town to provide the service to us. So we would love to have somebody work, you know, like Chris has done, but ultimately if we were going to do that, we would like that person to be prior law enforcement, or at least have some type of law enforcement experience. If we went outside, however, that person, we probably wouldn't be looking for law enforcement experience. And if they didn't have any experience in doing animal control, we could train them. So it would just take a little bit longer to get up to speed.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Carmel had a question.
Yeah, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yep. Hi there. So first of all, I wanted to thank you very much for your kind response to my message to you following the George Floyd verdict and so forth. And I'm happy to still work on putting that together. But I did actually have a second animal control question for Officer Chris. First of all, thank you for all your work on this area. I had worked a little bit with the previous police chief on discussing having an ordinance put in the village whereby, or in the town, whereby if there was a dog on dog attack, that there would be like fines put in, or kind of more well, we were dealing with a situation, I live on Upland, and we were dealing with a situation where there was a dog that lived in one home and then moved further up the street and got loose several times. I think mine was maybe the second attack of about 7. And it got to the point, like for mine, I don't think he had to pay any sort of fee at all. I had to pay, a couple $100 in vet bills on Christmas Day in December 2018, and kind of ruined the Christmas day for the family. So that I was walking up the sidewalk, the dog actually was fleeing into the street because the dog was coming charging at us, and from its backyard, it got loose from the person's daughter-in-law. So and so he says that I was on his property. That's what he said. I was not on his property. I was walking up the sidewalk and actually in the street when the attack happened. And so they I guess we're going to put forward some sort of work towards an ordinance or something. And I was just wondering if that ever happened. So that's the question.
It's in the pipeline.
Rob, you want to handle that? Because you're the one that's been crafting all of that.
So yes, Carmel, we do have a policy that's been waiting to all of our policies, or let me say that all of our ordinances are kind of been shelved until we had an outcome of whether we were going to merge or not merge. So we've had something to address that, because the fines that we have now are very limited as what actions can be taken. So we've updated that. So we are allowed to issue fines for more of the offenses where we can't currently do that for the village or the town. This one kind of brings us up into the 21st century.
Yeah, we've had several ordinances that we've been working on, and Rob's been pretty busy writing those.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And with everything we had planned on getting those into motion last fall, and then with the merger questions and everything that have come up, we said, we're not. The select board and the trustees have too much on their plate right now. There's too many questions, so we're kind of put it off. But we do have one that's in the works there, and it's ready it's in a draft form, ready to be reviewed. That's for sure. So Yeah.
Very good. Okay, thanks. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
just kind of lost track of what finally did happen because I knew that it was going to be, put forward at some point to the board, and I was wondering if I'd missed it. So,
Yep,
well,
no,
thanks for
yeah.
working on that. So, thank you.
Yeah. Bet. I saw the question in the chat from Marvin, or the comment, and yeah, absolutely. We'll be putting out, if we're unable to fill that, internally, then we're going to be putting out a RFP, and we'll have qualifications that'll be attached to it, as to what the job entails and what they should expect. So yeah, absolutely, we will. So does anybody else have anything they want to ask Chris or while she's here? Because no. Okay, well, I'm gonna leave it up to you. You're welcome to stay with us, or
Ron,
hang
actually,
on,
I wanted to ask
Doug,
Chris.
Doug and Lorraine are, hang on. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Lorraine.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Chris, and all, since you have so much experience, and as a female, a woman, did you, kind of as an exit interview question, did you make recommendations to our department in terms of policy and how you could see us improve in terms of public safety and working conditions and so on and so forth? And if you do, can you share them with us?
I haven't had my exit interview yet.
In the town, the employee requests one, and so far, I'm not sure whether she's going to be doing that or not. That would be up to her to determine with the town manager.
Yeah, I meant superficially here.
Oh, sure.
You have, yeah.
Are you asking if she has any recommendations? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yep. Yep.
To tell you the truth, I have found that we have done such a nice job, especially with Chief Hove here, with hiring people and training and policies that help guide the officers, good, strong field training officers. I can't think of too much that I could add as suggestions. I feel it's a nice way to go out, is knowing that the place is in good hands and it's continuing to work as I always liked it working.
Okay. Doug?
I just wanted to say hey and good luck and congratulations. It's been a while, but when I realized that this was your actual last day, I couldn't resist jumping on and saying hi.
Thank you very much, Doug. I appreciate that, and it was always fun working with you.
You too.
In case anyone hadn't figured it out, Doug worked here for quite a while as well, and left here as a sergeant a few years ago to take another job, and now he's moved on to even another job after that with more importance.
I don't know about more important. But.
I don't know. You want to tell them what your job title is now?
I'm now the Associate Director for Safety and Security at Dartmouth College.
There you go.
Yeah, fantastic.
So,
Great.
Okay. Does anybody else? I'm going to open it up. Does anybody have anything that they want to talk about, or talk about what's going on in their neighborhood or anything like that? And oh, one last thing. If I'm going to leave it up to you, Chris, you're welcome to stay, or
I'll
you're
stay.
okay. Perfect. In case something, absolutely.
something pops up.
Absolutely. So does anybody else have something they want to talk about going on in their neighborhood, or anything that you'd like to know about the police department that we could help with? I see Brad.
It's me again. So now that the second merger vote has taken place, I know you put a lot of items on the shelf awaiting the outcome, especially ordinance changes or combining ordinances. So how do you go forward from this point? Or are you just going to wait and see if they can find another avenue to resolution? But I mean, it wouldn't happen for quite some time. So how do you move forward?
I think at this point, since the voters have pretty much spoken and said that the direction they want to go, and it looks like that's the direction we're headed. I think at this point, we will just go ahead and do things separately with each of the boards, try to get the ordinances to look as much alike as possible. So it still accomplishes what we wanted to do, which was try to eliminate some of that confusion for officers. But we'll just have to work with both boards now to be able to get those ordinances passed. And it's a little bit more work, but it's honestly, it probably will work out just fine. So now I'm going to make Lieutenant go back and take that one ordinance that he had crafted for both entities that would look exactly the same. And now he's going to have to do some work to pull things out of it that don't apply to the village, so that way it will meet their standards as well as the town. So it's just going to be a little bit more work, but yeah, I don't think we can wait, Brad. I don't think we can wait too much longer to do those. We have folks like Carmel was just saying, have been looking for this animal ordinance. We've got a traffic ordinance that we've been wanting to get through that's going to address some of the things we've seen. We've got one on parks that we've been working on. So I think we've been waiting long enough for those. And I think we probably want to start getting those pushed through. I mean, I know the boards have plenty of work to do right now with merger and separation and those questions, but I think we're going to have to probably push that in there. So, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. Thank you.
You bet. Does
It's
anyone else have something they want to talk about? What's going on in your neighborhood or anything that we need to be concerned about, that we need to know about?
Ron, when you were doing your technical assistance work with Chris, Lieutenant Kissinger and Brad had started talking about the new body cams.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you wanted to, is that something you want to pick back up, Brad?
Rob pretty much clarified that the department started using them April 15th. And I know you had talked about the body cams in previous sessions, and it's nice to know that they're online now.
Yeah. So maybe I can do that. I mean, if Rob, and that's one of the reasons why I had him come today, because he's been the guy. So Rob is, as number 2 here, is the guy that makes the place run. I mean, he does all the logistical stuff. He makes a lot of day-to-day decisions and everything. And programs like this fall under his purview. So I'm going to let him talk about. You want to just talk about the features of the body cams that we purchased. Some of the things that it's going to bring to our department. Some of the things that we've noticed already that we're liking about that.
So most of you probably don't know, but this is the actual body cams that we use. They're pretty simplistic. This is the button you hit to record, and to stop recording, you have to hit it twice. So it's pretty convenient. It'll last pretty much the whole shift, depending on the number of calls. The officer might have to go in and grab a new battery. And to do that, you just move this button off the side and put a new battery in, sort of like you would do a radio. And the reason we went with this particular company is it matches our cruiser video. So the 2 videos are linked together. So you actually have the cruiser video and the video of the officer. A lot of agencies have gone with a different company, and the officers where the camera is. So when they activate it, most time when they're driving, all they're going to see is a steering wheel. So we get the additional benefits of seeing what the cruiser camera sees. That's a fish angle lens of about 130 degrees, if not a little bit better. And then when the officer steps out, you get the actual view from the officer's perspective, as well as what you see in the cruiser. The officers like wearing the cameras. They see it as an asset for them. And we have not had any issues with the cameras themselves. We've had some issues with the software uploading to the cloud, but that does not affect how the officers use it or any of the information. The officers, once they collect the video, they can tag it as an arrest or motor vehicle stop or a warning. So that helps us as far as what we do with the video long term. And then we'll see where we go from there.
So when the video is taken, it's immediately uploaded to the cloud?
The video does not upload until it gets back to the office. Once it gets in with the range of the office, it senses it's in range, and then it starts uploading all the video from the cruiser. Right now, the body cameras have to be brought back in the building to be uploaded. It's a lot quicker speeds. If we did it out in the car, it probably wouldn't upload by the time the officer went back out on another call.
Right.
Right. It does have that capability, but for speed reasons, we're having everybody bring it back in the office and upload it, and it's pretty quick. Within 5 minutes, you have majority of the video uploaded from the body cameras. And the clarity on these are outstanding. I think it starts out at 8K and then goes down to 1080p. So the clarity is really outstanding. It's movie quality.
Right.
Rob, you want to talk about just our policy for just a second and where the content of that came from?
Sure. The policy that we adopted for the body worn cameras to coincide with our cameras is model policy that's being presented by the state. So we're actually using language that's probably going to come down through legislature at some point later this year, mandating this stuff. So we use the same language that the state's going to use. So there's no contradiction in policies. That's one of the policies that is going to come from the state. The other one is probably going to be use of force. So we're right in line with what the state's expectations are going to be as far as what the content of the policy should look like.
Yeah, if you want to see that, it is on our website, along with several other of our policies that everyone is really concerned with. So yeah, you can check that out there if you want to see it. It was just posted there last week. So does anyone have any questions for Rob on body cameras or anything like that, or anything else? Okay.
So Rob, does that mean just a brief overview of the policy in terms of when you had to turn it on and off, or things like that, in terms of what the state policy is?
It spells out exactly when the cameras have to be turned on. Basically, any contact with civilian interaction should be turned on if it's going to take any law enforcement action. Casual conversations on the roadway or on the street, if you meet somebody on the sidewalk and you have a casual conversation, that does not need to be recorded.
And so in terms of learning curve, I would think, because it's such a new thing, how long does it take to kind of get used to having to do those things? Because I wouldn't necessarily remember to turn it on all the time if I hadn't had to.
Learning curve is not really, because the officer's used to having a body camera or body mic anyway. So it's kind of along the same muscle memory. You turn it on when the lights come on. This one syncs with the car, so it comes on when the blue lights are activated. So it's really not that much different. And the younger officers are really adapted to technology. So our learning curve, I would say, was less than a week for the officers. It's really, the only addition is this one has a camera, whereas the other one just had the microphone.
And not to lead the witness, but I would assume for the officers that hopefully they feel protected in wearing these as well, that it works for both the public and for the officers.
Oh, definitely. Before we even had these, my tenure at Essex, we've always had cameras in the cruisers. And I would say in the high 90s, whenever a complaint was filed against the officer, the cruiser video was in favor of the officer and the outcome. So the officers always have felt protected by video. So I don't believe anybody here is threatened by wearing a camera. And in fact, they feel that there's another person on their side that's independent of what they're saying. The video captures a good perspective of what actually happened.
And I just comment on that a little bit as well. I mean, where I came from in St. Albans PD, we had body cameras since I think it was 2012. So we had them for about 6 years before I left there. And our program, I think, out of the complaints that I ever handled, against an officer, I think most of the time, I think a great majority, probably one case I can think of out of those 6 years where the body camera actually showed that the officer did something wrong. And it provides accountability for both the police department and for citizens as well. So I think it's a win-win program for everyone. It took us a little while to get it up and running here because of, obviously, we started our program right at the time when everyone else was starting their program as well, including the state police, and they purchased $700,000 worth of cameras right at the same time that we did. So their program got up and running faster than ours did, obviously, because they're a bigger client with this company. But you know, now that we have them, I think it's a valuable thing for everybody. And I think the officers, I know at least several of the officers have told me personally that they were looking forward to having this because they can document evidence as well. It's a good way to capture things that they may not have seen or may not be able to talk about in an affidavit. It's on the video instead. So I think it's a win-win for everybody, I think. But so
I love that. That's great in terms of evidence. That's a really good point. And
Yeah.
you guys, will you be able to, on occasion, like if something happens that that you might want to use for training or retraining, or kind of like going back to the football game and going forward from there in terms of learning strategies, will you tag certain incidents as a training tool and review?
Oh, most definitely. It goes hand in hand with the cruiser video. We use those for trainings. If there's something that's significant that we can use to train and educate other officers, now we get the additional benefits of the cruiser videos. So it just gives us there's different perspectives on what we can learn from special incidents that occur.
The system that we have really amazes me because it takes two different cameras, two different sets of video and audio, and then literally combines it into a file once it gets back in the software here at the office. And literally when you pull it up on the screen, you're getting what, 3 different views now we have, Rob? The back, we have a backseat camera. We have, we're getting 4 actually. We have a wide camera on the cruiser. We have another normal camera on the cruiser, and then we have a body cam that all syncs together. The audio is all synced and everything. It really amazes me how the technology has come along.
Correct. Yeah, we have 4 camera angles every time we have a car stop or anytime the lights are activated.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, because on the Chauvin trial where they synced up all the different cameras, it was very helpful to understand the full picture and the context.
Yep. Yeah, different perspectives. Absolutely. Very important. So, yeah. Does anybody else have anything they want to ask about that? Okay. I just wanted to ask real quick. I know last week was a pretty significant event and it was mentioned, Lorraine just mentioned it, the Chauvin trial and everything, and that was a pretty significant event in our country. And I just wanted to check in on the temperature of everybody and how they're doing with that. And you know, we did put out a statement last week. I wrote that statement as a way of just recognizing that moment in time and letting everybody know that we have and will continue to do things that are the most contemporary thinking. So I just wanted to check in with everybody that's here and make sure y'all are doing okay with that. And if there's anything you wanted to share with us about that, but Brad.
Probably the most compelling evidence in that trial was the video. And
Right.
you'd have enhanced yours. You know, he was judged by a panel of his peers, and we know the outcome is based on evidence, and that's what it always should be, based on the
Right.
facts.
Yep. Agreed. Yeah, the video was really powerful, and that's what really was that video that set off this whole movement, right? So
Yeah. But
one
you know, in
one
the
video
end,
can do that.
yeah, in the end, the facts are what determines the outcome,
That's right.
and everyone should, you know, everyone should wait to find out what the facts are before jumping to conclusions.
That's what we would like to have happen. We would like things based on
Right.
facts.
Oh, Brad Kennison's on the Zoom meeting. Brad Kennison's talking to the police department.
Someone's using your name.
Yes, I am.
Hi, Donna, your mic is on.
Someone's
Would you like to join us? I can't
muted.
see who you are. I can't see who you are. We have a lot of phantoms on this call. Who are you?
Shoot.
Looks like
They
it
don't know
was
they're
Donna.
not, they're unmuted.
Okay, Donna, hello. I want to say hello to my friend John Gagne too. I see he's joined us.
I think for me, based on what you just said, Bradley, like it's so profound, our history without cameras, like how that lack of objective factual evidence has been able to play out in the finding of guilt or not. Like I just find it comforting, as I imagine the police officers do, that there is this way of doing policing now where it's right on film.
Yeah, that's kind of the way everyone feels, is we're okay with that. You know, if you're doing your job the correct way, we won't have an issue. I will caution that video doesn't tell the whole story, however, right? That's why it usually takes more than just a video to convict someone. There has to be more to it, and there's always more to the story. So you can't just take what you see in a video and make a judgment from it, as we've all learned. So
Right, but I can't imagine what that trial would have looked like without video, you know?
right.
I'll offer one other note of caution with the video, and that's that a lot of times it shows when Robin and Ron are both exactly right. The video most often exonerates the officer regarding the complaint, and it often shows that the circumstances that in their totality, the police officers were operating within the boundaries that they have established. And that may not be the popular opinion or popular perception or the desired outcome from a particular event. But when these videos do exonerate the officer or the police officers involved in a critical incident, that can not necessarily be accepted well by the public, but it's fact. Like that's the video. When we have that and we see the whole circumstances, it creates challenges to some of the narratives that are out there about what police are really doing, and we have to accept both sides of this. I can now honestly say we're former police officer, because when I got my Dartmouth job, I retired from the field, and I'm very kind of happy to be out at this point. But I am very happy that Derek Chauvin was convicted of the crimes that he was, because he did not do his job the way I believe I worked all of my career to do my job. And I'm grateful that that incident was caught the way it was, and that it was prosecuted successfully, because he did harm to the work I'd spent my life doing. But other times we will have videos that show how the officers did act within their bounds, but it will be an unpopular opinion with some groups or some people, and that will continue to offer us challenges as we go.
Good morning, Chief. Thank you for saying hi. I didn't
Hey,
realize
John.
you folks do this. I think it's an outstanding idea. And the biggest reason I wanted to join was less about seeing what this is all about, but I saw that the person sitting behind you is actually retiring. And I really wanted to say good morning to Chris and wish her the very best.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. That means a lot. It really does. Thank you so much. It was good working with you and seeing you at the academy and all you did down there for ages.
Now I do it from my home, and so if there's a delay, if I get asked a question or want to chime in, it's because one of the things that I've learned in this telecommuting environment, besides leveraging to finally get my home office computer gaming room, is always have the mute button on unless you actually want to talk. Because I get interrupted by a 4-year-old granddaughter or a German Shepherd.
Point.
Is your German Shepherd registered in Essex, John?
Well played.
And
He's
not
working till the
end. Hey, so one thing I wanted to tell everybody that's here is please tell everybody, please lock up your bicycles. If you have a bicycle, I don't care what it is, please put it somewhere that is secured behind a lock and key of some type. We have been hammered with thefts of bicycles in the last 6 months. I've been preaching this for the last 3 or 4 months, making sure people understand I mean, some of the bikes that we're seeing stolen, actually, I should say most of the bikes we're seeing stolen are like in the $5,000 to $8,000 range. So these are really, really high-end bicycles that are being stolen amongst even the normal ones. So please tell everybody, lock your bicycles up. Do everything you can to prevent somebody. And right now we've been working on this. I've had a detective working on this case, all of these cases for the last 3 or 4 months. And right now we still don't have a solid lead on where they are going. We have a suspicion, but we don't have a solid lead as to where these are all ending up. So, and we're not the only ones. This is South Burlington, Colchester. Everybody is getting the same thing. So I'm trying to get that message out as much as I possibly can to please tell your friends and neighbors, if they have a bicycle, keep it somewhere under lock and key.
Not even more than even a bike lock.
Yes,
Put
more
it
than,
inside, because
yes.
you can have it hanging up in your carport, and bike locks can be cut easily.
Yeah.
If your bike is valuable, they can take it out of the carport and carry it away with the bike lock on it. So yeah, not visible, locked behind closed doors.
Yeah, visibility, I think, is the biggest thing that we've been seeing. Even bikes that have been under carports, like Chris was saying, inside a shed or something where somebody might have seen, that being put in there. And we've had them taken from closed areas too. So do everything we possibly can to make it harder for criminals to take these things. So, yeah. Okay.
Ron, I wanted
Yeah.
to go back to Chauvin. I wasn't done with I didn't realize Chauvin had moved on. But,
Oh, I'm sorry. No, go right ahead.
I moved to
Go ahead.
bikes, like, woo. Just a couple of questions. What was the internal temperature for the officers after that? I mean, it was such a big deal, I would think, as an officer to see something like that. It's so rare in terms of impacting your work, because one of the things that really struck me on the video in terms of the police officers and feeling some empathy for them was that Chauvin was a senior officer, an elite officer. And for those new guys, what were they? One of them, it was his first or second day, and another one, maybe 1 week, is that they look to the leaders, right, for the right thing to do. And that one guy took the pulse a couple times and even said to Officer Chauvin, should we roll him? So you could tell there was concern there. How in terms of power structures, how can you guys kind of deal with empowering officers to be able to out a bad apple? Because it's been such a hard problem, is the unified blue, and kind of break that code of blue silence. And recently saw, and I was wondering if this was part of the impact, and I don't remember seeing this in Vermont, but I was away for a long time, that a St. Albans police officer actually spoke out against another officer. And that to me was so rare. And I'm hoping that's because the culture is changing and shifting, and that, as Doug said, that part of it is that it impacts the view from the public of the good work that has been done and undermines the trust. And public trust is just so crucial and tantamount to good police work and public safety. So I'm wondering how it impacted that. And then the second part of that, in terms of use of force policies, because I see deadly force is certainly allowed to be applied, certainly by Vermont law still with that new legislation. When I saw that poor officer and that poor gentleman in crisis somewhere in Vermont recently, where he shot him and he was naked and bloody, coming out of his home, and it had been, I think, the second or third call that officer who used deadly force on the gentleman with a mental crisis. I was wondering, in terms of going back and looking at it, was certainly within the law that he could do that, because I think he had a knife in his hand and was running at the officer. Are there, in hindsight too, are there other ways, like could he, given that he had a mental crisis clearly, and the officer had seen that earlier in the day, could the officer have gotten back in the car, or would we use that kind of experience, because it's a failure of the system in a way, to go back and how can we do this better, or what policy can we change so that we have a different outcome?
So I think you got several questions in there. The first one about the temperature of the department. And after the trial, I mean, obviously I'm the chief, so not everyone wants to come down and tell me how they're feeling, but so I'll let you guys speak to that if you know anything more than I do. But I think if everyone here thinks the same way that I did, I think there was a lot of relief that afternoon, that it was a guilty verdict, that may somehow save us from a lot of conflict and other more terrible things in the country. So there was a lot of relief with that. But I also think there was a lot of vindication with it as well, because from the time that this happened last year, I mean, I think every justified police officer in this country has been trying to separate themselves from that person who committed that crime, right? And just like Doug said, I mean, that was really a strike against all of the good work that we have all done in all of our careers. And to have, I think that's what hurt most and still hurts a lot, is to have folks, lump us all into one group. So I'll answer it like that, is that I think most everybody was feeling justification and was happy with the result of that. As far as, let me see, the second question I'm thinking was the use of force.
Well, the power structure. How do you?
The power structure. That was where I wanted. Thank you. So we've done everything we can, and I think most police departments in the United States now are doing everything that they can to break that cycle. And I wouldn't say it's just in law enforcement. I would say it's in every industry that there is. I'm not sure where all of you work at, but I'll guarantee you there's some type of hierarchy of people who have been there longer, or there's the rookie who comes in and they're just learning, that type of thing. And there's always an informal, even if somebody's not wearing stars on their shoulders or brass on their collar, there's some type of informal structure and hierarchy of people. And I think we're always going to struggle with that, because that's the way humans are. But what we need to do as law enforcement leaders is ensure and make sure our people understand that when it comes to someone actually committing a policy violation that is related to use of force or any type of unlawful acts, that our folks are 100% able and justified to intervene in that. And I think most police departments now have issued duty to intervene policies that specify that. I think we've all kind of assumed that throughout the years in my career. I think we all assumed that those of us who followed policy and were doing the best that we could would naturally do that. But I think spelling that out in the policy is actually the best way to do it. And I'm happy that we have enacted that policy here, because that really relieves some of that hierarchy and that fear of being, oh, I can't turn in so-and-so or else I'm going to be somehow ostracized for doing that, and I'm the rat. We expect our people to act professionally at all times, and we expect everyone to hold everyone else accountable. So I think it's a culture shift, and I think it's a culture shift that is a good one, and I think it's been done well over the years, and even better in the last year. So and as far as the use of force, I'm not really familiar with the last one you were talking about, with the mentally ill person. But I will say, I mean, we have, over the last 10 years, I would say more than that, probably 20 years, I really believe that law enforcement in general, and especially here in Vermont, has acted much more, I guess the word would be smart. I mean, in the early days back when I started, I think we did some things back then that we probably would say now, well, that was pretty dumb, putting myself in danger like that. Going on a warrant and simply kicking in the door and then running through the house to try to find some drugs or whatever. Well, we realize now that was stuff we did way back when, and it probably wasn't very smart. That we were putting people in danger by doing that, and especially ourselves. So now we make decisions a lot better, and what we expect for our officers now, what we train them to do, is to consider all alternatives that can be used prior to using force within reason. Now, obviously, there's a lot of cases where the officer is not going to have a chance to either de-escalate something or unable to de-escalate something or use anything other than the force that they need to use. But we do, and we try to encourage people to use their heads when it comes to thinking about how can I solve this problem without having to make that person do something, because ultimately that's what force is designed to do. It's designed to make that person do what we want them to do, even if they don't want to. And we're trying to get people to do those things without having to use force that's harmful. So I hope that
Right.
answers that question, but I think
Yeah,
somebody
I'm
else.
sorry that you don't remember the case, because it was fairly recent and it was pretty horrific, and it was here in Vermont, and it is rare for a gun, an officer end up killing someone with a gun.
Mhm.
So I think it was like 2 months ago, but it
Yep.
was horrific, and I feel for the officer as well,
Mhm.
because that, I'm sure, could be very traumatic and scarring. And then the other thing is, after our last racial equity task force meeting, which was pretty raw in the room, did you liaison with our BIPOC community members and see how they're doing? I was just curious, and if you did, any feedback.
I did. So I've had a couple of conversations since then with our internal group, and also myself and Tabitha. We touch base all the time, and I checked in with her the other day, and and according to her, yeah, there was a lot of trauma that from last week for the BIPOC population, and we're hoping that once we move away from that time and give it a little bit of time, we'll be able to work through some of those things and get them to a point where they can focus on the work that we want to do. So yeah, we have, and since then we have talked to folks that are in touch. So yeah.
Thank you, Ron.
You bet. Doug, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to reflect a little bit more on I don't know the case that she's referring to specifically with mental health, but I also, if you don't know, teach in the criminology department at St. Mike's College, and a course called Issues in Contemporary Policing. So we kind of had a lot to talk about this fall. And we, one of the cases we reviewed in the class in the fall was from the summer from, I believe it was Philadelphia, where police were called to a domestic disturbance, and a person who had a very severe mental health issue came out of the house and just immediately charged the officer with a knife. And the officer was on scene all of 8 seconds and shot the person as he was being chased down the street. And there was a lot of concern regarding that incident, and that the underlying cause for the person was mental health, severe mental health issues. But the action in the moment was a threat of lethal violence, and that was what the officer was confronted with. And I can tell you that in 19 years, not nearly as much as the other people on the screen have, but it's long enough to have been around a bit. There's not a single officer I've ever met that believes that the mental health system as a whole is doing everything that it should and working right, and that we are in our proper place in caring for mental health in society. We're not. Mental health services are abysmal, and that's not an indictment of the state of Vermont or anybody else in a particular person. That's that the system itself is not doing what it's supposed to, and police end up picking up mental health issues not as mental health issues a lot of times, but as disturbances, as violence, because it's gotten so far out of line because of lack of services, lack of people being able to coordinate care. It's just a real mess. And police are just literally left picking up the scraps of whatever disaster gets thrown at them, because there's no other place for people in these severe crises. So while the underlying cause often is mental health, the police are they're only able to respond with authority to the things they have authority over, and they're only really able to confront the actions in the moment and try and get somebody into the system where it belongs. And in a person's crisis, when they meet us in a state of violence, there's really not an alternative to being mental health providers. It's respond to the actions. And I'll offer the conjecture that in that case in Philadelphia, and if you remember that one, if an unarmed mental health worker had been called in the first person to walk up to that scene because the family had identified that if the person in crisis had mental health issues. If an unarmed mental health worker had walked up to that, it would have been a homicide first, and then still very likely a shooting after that once the police arrived. So there is a role for police officers in engaging in mental health crises when people are in that state of violence. And it's unfortunate, but the underlying cause is not the issue that the officers are there to deal with. They're there to deal with the actions.
Right, it's really root causes, and certainly with the explosion of pharmaceuticals in our state, compiled with often that leads to a mental health crisis. So it's really overwhelmed the public safety system, which again, looking back at some of the models that are succeeding across the country, and some have been in place for quite some time, there is a fourth first responder, which is a health crisis first responder. And Vermont, I have a good friend who's a psychiatrist, we are just struggling to have enough mental health services here because we don't have the staffing in a lot of ways. And I wonder if part of that is because of our value that we place in the pay scale for a lot of our social workers is they're very low paid wages. And perhaps that we need to reprioritize and rethink that as Vermonters, because certainly at the municipal level, there's a lot of latitude at the municipal level too, and they see that the state structure now, some of the legislation is being picked up at the state level, and certainly we looked at the federal level. We're starting to see more push at the federal level too to kind of even the playing field. So it is pretty interesting time to be in for public safety as we learn and become more aware of the root causes. And to me, in the long run, looking at some of the lawsuits that happen out of some of these incidents, it's also good business and makes good economic sense to start in a preventative way as opposed to the action at hand. And when I spoke about that, I wish I could find the incident because it was fairly recent, but the officer he got a call from, I guess, a neighbor, knew that there was someone in crisis. So he went out to the gentleman's house, and he knew him by name because he had already seen him before, but it was in a very rural setting and he was there by himself. And so that's why I kind of look back in terms of dispatch, because I don't know how much he knew, like if he knew it was the same person or not. But to me, having known ahead of time, is there any kind of cataloging of, almost like when you're a doctor, you get to look at the sheet from the whole history. Sometimes wonder in terms of dispatch and how we work in public safety, often the officers don't have that context before they arrive on the scene. And I'm wondering if there's any way to systemically gather that kind of, in this age, gather that kind of data to arm an officer a little bit more in terms of expectation and try to firm up that kind of system. Because I think the officer probably would have tried to get a mental health service worker out with him. And being in the rural area, in retrospect, and again, he was fully in the law. I understand why he did it, because it was being charged with a knife. But there was so much room. He could have even gone back in the car in a way. I don't think that's going to be his first impulse, though. So there's just, to me, it's not an indictment or a judgment on him. I'm just saying, like, when we see things like that as a whole in Vermont, do we take those incidences, review them, again, like a football team, and say, and a coach, hey, where were the holes here? How could we have a better outcome? Like, how often does it happen that you guys, Mr. Gagne, I think you're involved in training too, that you guys then take those cases and review and put your heads together and all your experiences and kind of crowdsource and say, how could we do better, or how can we institute different policies?
So I think the first part of that is we do have a common information system or records management system where if someone has had prior instances with the police, their name will be there, and they do sometimes have what's called an alert that's attached to their name as to being a danger to law enforcement or others or something like that. And if those are in there, then certainly the officer is told about that before they go by the dispatcher. But sometimes those aren't in there because it's their first time, or someone didn't put that in there, because they weren't notified of it. They weren't told that this person had done this type of thing. So we do have that system, and incidents like that do get reviewed. I mean, obviously they get pushed all the way up to the training council here in Vermont. And, you know, if there's tweaks that need to be made in training, if it's a training, what's called a training scar, where the person is being trained the wrong way, and that's what caused the incident, then something will be done with that. But I think everybody here would probably agree that this falls to kind of what Doug said, which is where we're seeing a shortfall with mental health resources and how we're dealing with that at that level. You know, we have a great relationship here, and we've been working with community outreach with Howard Mental Health for 4 years now, and they're doing some great work with us. One of the problems that we see sometimes is that the information can only be one way because of health regulations and because of HIPAA. You know, we can give them information, but they're not allowed to give us information back. You know, so sometimes that can be a problem for us. I mean, we have to comply with federal law. So.
And we've only recently had them working till 8 o'clock.
Yeah, correct. I mean, they recently, within the last year, went to 8 o'clock at night. So before that, they had even less funding than they do now, and they weren't around more than 40 hours a week. So now they are, and they've recently gone to a different structure of how they're assigning their people. So I've seen them here in the last probably 3 months. I've seen them here at Essex more than I've ever seen them before, and a lot of that has to do with a change in policy that we made, where, you know, they can be, you know, calls can be diverted to them automatically without going to an officer. You know, obviously we would love for them to have more resources, but I think it comes not only at the street level. I think what Doug is referring to is more at the institutional level as well, where there are some folks that need that institution to be able to get themselves right and then get back out. And there are so few beds that we see people that are pushed back out on the street constantly. So, Brad.
One school of thought these days is to send social workers out to domestic disturbances. So what kind of outcome would you expect, you know, in that case? Do they have more information at their disposal than you would have if they went out to a domestic disturbance?
I think they would have a different set of information than we would. Certainly, they might have some knowledge that they couldn't initially share with us, but now that there's an emergent situation, they can actually, under federal law, they can share some of that. But I think, like Doug was referring to, you know, we wouldn't want to send them out there by themselves. Handling a domestic disturbance is one of the most dangerous calls that an officer can go to. And that's not something you're going to want to send someone who's unarmed. Now, the community outreach and workers like that would be a huge, and currently are, they do get involved with our domestic disturbances. They're a really great resource to try to patch that up and make things better going forward. But initially, there needs to be some type of law enforcement in there just for safety reasons. There has to be. So we can't just rely on an unarmed person to answer those calls. There has to be a cooperative effort there, I think. So.
Okay, thank you.
I think some of that too is in Chittenden County anyway, the Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, the data that they report is that 80% of domestic abuse situations don't get reported to law enforcement because victims of domestic violence don't feel that their needs are being met by a criminal legal response. So if the social worker is there with the police officer, I think it gives the victim an opportunity to talk with somebody where they might get information, support, a safety plan, that kind of thing, to feel more grounded in order to think about whether or not they want to share information with the police or that kind of thing. I feel like those two are probably somewhat related.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't they have access to the social worker at any other time to talk about, you know, issues that they've encountered?
Well, I don't think in the heat of the moment when there's been an intense incident, and maybe even the neighbors are the ones who've called and they're still in, in conflict. I am no expert on policing. I just, because I work on the other side with the domestic and sexual violence victims, I thought I would just share that data.
I
because
can-
I don't think a lot of people know that. And I just,
I was just saying I could probably help out. So they do kind of get involved, Brad, when the officers go like to domestic, the example that was given. The officers do a lethality assessment, and if the person meets that criteria or the officer feels that they could benefit it, we put them in touch with STEPS counselor right then and there, so they have access to talk to somebody and resources to maybe get them out of that situation for the night. So that's how we utilize that without having an actual person on scene with the officers. Is they're able to use a phone and contact them while we're on scene if they're willing to do that. And again, that's up to the potential victim, giving them the empowerment to make that decision whether they want to get that help right then and there, or if they want to talk to them at a later date time, they are actually giving a phone number to contact them at a later date if they choose to do that.
Is there a post-assessment too of, it sounds like these are fairly new things that we're doing, Ron, if we actually have more access, are we measuring the improvement at all?
With having the resources that we have.
Yeah, like if you have now more access to that resource, and as Jill points out, certainly there's a lot of data out about domestic victims and non-reporting, and also not from their own histories, not feeling safe to call police in the first place because there's trust barriers and other issues, or they're afraid their partner might harm them if they do reach out. And certainly we need, shelter system, certainly under other underlying services to help support them. But now that you have access to a little bit more, is there going to be kind of a measuring stick of from when that started to, for the following year, just to see if it is reducing anything, if it is helping in certain cases? Do we then go back with a metric for like domestic cases that you guys are involved with a social worker in terms of outcomes and improvements?
Yeah, and I see where you're going with that. Yeah, there is somewhat of a process to evaluate that. So we get information from STEPS, and I don't know if you guys all know what that is. That's the domestic violence organization, victims advocate organization here in Chittenden County that provides assistance to domestic violence victims. So we do get feedback from them as to what they're seeing and what they would like to do. And Rob had talked about lethality assessment. That was actually a program that was brought to law enforcement by STEPS to intervene in those types of situations as soon as possible at the scene where a victim is actually given or asked a set of questions that's meant to evaluate the danger of that they might be in at that particular moment. And so we get those types of programs from them. We evaluate them as law enforcement as well, and then we provide feedback to them as to whether that's working or not. But as Jill was saying as well, I mean, she's kind of involved in a lot of those services as well, and we get feedback as to what those are, how that's being handled. I would tell you that in my career, I think domestic violence has probably been one of the things, or one of the areas that we could definitely improve on as a system, not just law enforcement, but response to that. Breaking that cycle has been very, very tough. And I've gone from the thinking when I was first employed as, making an arrest is the wrong thing to do. And, getting the offender out of there and giving them a second chance and that type of thing is probably what you need to do for them, to then we went with better training, which was making an arrest is the right thing to do. And we need to intervene in that as soon as possible. And now we've kind of moved, I think, a little bit away from that, where we're still making arrests, but we're now more concerned about what do we do for the victim so that this doesn't continue to happen, and intervening in that at a time. So everything evolves in the response, as to how we handle those things. And that's just one type of call that we evaluate. But there's a lot of discussions and a lot of meetings that go on about how to do things better. Am I right in that, Jill? So
I don't think she heard you, Ron.
Yeah, she might not have.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I was just talking about how many meetings that we have to talk about how we do things, we can do things better.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay, well, Lorraine, do you have anything else with that, or does anybody else have anything else they want to talk about with that?
Geez, no, I'm sorry, I hogged a lot of airtime. I'm just,
That's quite all right.
know-
You created some great conversation.
I know so little about law enforcement because I've been so involved. I'm a kind of a squeakier cleaner. Like I've been stopped once, maybe kind of thing, for driving when I was 19 or whatever. I'm a nerd, so I'm really fascinated by the whole system. And
Quite okay.
also, one of the things that you said that strikes me is that for the police officers, when they see some of the work that I do as an activist, I'm sorry that it's taken, the unintended feeling is that you guys aren't appreciated, because that's not what's meant by some of my protest work, or it is not it. I don't paint a picture of all officers because there's bad apples.
Right.
But I am aware that it is very difficult, certainly having worked for many years of my life in many different systems, that it is very difficult at times in personal situations to speak out when you see something wrong, especially as a police officer, and being unionized. And I think to see that kind of work is just really hopeful to me. And also just to see some of the new stats that we have and their ability for research and to globally tap into better systems at work, and that you guys actually are thinking that way. We just have so much more at our fingertips to learn than we used to. And I'm happy to see that people are open to that. And hopefully when we do this kind of work together, feelings aren't too hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and don't get me wrong. I wasn't talking about anyone in particular or any group in particular. I just think with the general feeling in this country, about law enforcement in the last year, it's really taken a toll on a lot of us that are in this job. And I'd be lying if I didn't say that, I don't think there's a law enforcement officer in this country that probably hasn't thought to themselves, why am I doing this in the last year? And it's not anybody on a local level. This is on a national level where we're constantly, vilified in the media and that type of thing. So it just wears on you at times. But certainly, here's what I will say: don't ever apologize for asking questions of us. I mean, I love bragging about my police department. I love talking about what we do. And I wish that more people would come and ask questions. And I think just knowing each other and being able to ask those questions and answer questions. And then if I was to not know something from you, Lorraine, or anybody else that's here, I'm hoping that if I could ask you a question, you would answer me honestly as well. And I think by doing that, we just get to know each other better and are on the same playing field at that point. So I think when people don't understand each other, I think that's where the conflict comes in. I think if people would just talk to each other and get to know each other and their perspectives, I think we'd all be a lot better off.
Well, what's interesting, Ron, is that your shared experience and feeling. I think that both sides feel that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting that both are experiencing the same thing. So, and it's certainly a trust building exercise, and that takes a long time.
Yep. Exactly. I agree with that.
Sorry if I zoned out for a second there, if you referred to me, but I have a question that's completely out of curiosity, and it might not even be based in fact, but in use of force, when an officer is being approached by somebody who is wielding a knife, or it seems like that people that are shot to be killed, not like debilitated, like they don't get shot in the thigh, they get shot in the head or something. Is that actually what the policy is, or am I just like seeing it play out some ways and only holding on to some of those experiences? Like, how does that work?
Janet, you want to handle that? This is, I'm not laughing, but that's a very, very common question. It goes back a long ways before any of this ever started.
Yeah. What started that, Jill, unfortunately, is what you see on TV.
Yeah.
You got to understand, when you're under stress, you're not going to be able to hit a thigh, especially if you're trying to move, if someone's coming at you. what's taught by the firearm instructor is what we learn at the academies. We shoot for center of mass. That's where our highest probability of, and we don't shoot to kill, we shoot to incapacitate. And what that means is until that threat stops coming at us, we're still going to be firing rounds. So that's why you get people that are hit multiple times. And if you often looked at the shootouts, there's also misses in there. So that kind of, we can't replicate the stress that you're going to go under when someone's coming at you with a weapon or knife. So that's why you see that happen, is we're not able to hit that. Maybe if you're a sniper, you would try something like that, but you have the time and you have the ability to do that. It's not realistic to ask an officer to do that under stress, to try and hit a smaller body part, given the limitations. A handgun is a defensive weapon. It's not an offensive weapon because of the sight radius. It doesn't give you that. You use that in defense more than you would as, say, a rifle, which is an offensive weapon.
So just to follow up with that, I mean, our mission with that in that situation is to stop that act as soon as possible, because number one, I want to live. I don't want that person to also harm anybody else. So I need to do whatever I can to stop that action as quickly as possible with as few rounds as possible. But as he was just referring to, handgun bullets are very unreliable and they're not as powerful as TV would show that. So that's why many times there needs to be more than one round fired in order to be able to do that. So you're talking about a moving target with someone who's under stress, and thighs and legs and arms are all very small targets. So hit potential, even for the greatest center of mass, it's very, very low in a stressful situations. And then you're going to ask someone to try to hit something small. It's pretty much unrealistic. So that's why we train to hit center of mass.
And it's really helpful to hear that, because I haven't ever seen it happen in person. I've talked to Kurt McGlinnis about his experience back in his career, but you're right. All I see is the footage that you see on TV, and it's just
right. I would
be sensationalized, they're shooting to kill, versus this is an actual evidence-based thing that you have to try to hit in this body of mass, and it's not to kill. It's to. I
would love for everybody to have the experience to go through a simulator similar to the ones that we've all done, where you're in a you're put in a stressful situation and you're expected to solve that situation as quickly as possible. And sometimes, and as Doug was talking earlier, in 8 seconds or whatever it is. I mean, time goes by really fast. And anyone that will tell you that's been in a deadly force situation or even a use of force situation, things happen really, really quickly, and things go bad really, really fast. So yeah, I understand. Like I said, I wasn't laughing at that question. I don't want anybody to think that. We've heard that question a lot of times over the years, and it's like he said, mostly that comes from what people see on TV. And things are different. So I always like answering that question. That's one of the things I do. So.
And I'm fine with the laughter. I work for the police department and I don't know the answer to that. So thank you for this safe space to ask curious questions.
Absolutely. So, well, has everyone had a good time? So again, I want to thank everyone who's come and spent the last hour and a half with us. I think these conversations are great. I think the questions that come up during it are fantastic. And you all have my email. You all know where I work at. If there's something that comes up in the middle, I would encourage you to send it to one of us, and we'll get you whatever we can to help. And plan on doing these the last Friday of the month. I think that's what we're going to do, and we'll continue being here. So if anybody thinks of something in the next month and wants to come back, we'll be here. And also, we're recording these now and we're posting them on our website. So if you know somebody that'd be interested, feel free to send them the link when I get it posted later today or tomorrow, and they can see it as well. So
thank you, and congratulations, Chris.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. We're throwing her out later today. So if you want to be here to witness us throwing her out, you can be here. So
nice to meet y'all. Thank you.
Rob. Thanks, Ron. Great great work. I think you're reaching out to and Jill, reaching out to the community on a monthly basis adds to the healing and bringing the community together. And we appreciate that.
Absolutely. Very welcome, Brad. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you. Take care. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye, John.
See you later.